Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Many federal employees with long time horizons to retirement automatically put their TSP contributions into an L fund. That will mature about the same time as they plan to retire. My next guest says this set it and forget it approach can actually cost you purchasing power. Here with more details is certified financial planner Art Stein. Art, thanks so much for joining me in studio today.
Terry, happy to be here.
All right, you're going to talk to us about L Funds in the TSP this morning.
Yeah, the L Funds are the most recent addition to the TSP, although they've been around certainly for way more than 10 years. But they are not a new investment sector. They are a new way to invest in the 5 traditional funds. And the 5 traditional funds are the G, F, C, S, and I, which are invested in various bond and stock markets. What the L funds do is when they're first introduced, they have a very high percentage allocation to the stock funds, a very low percentage allocation to the bond funds. But that allocation changes over time and eventually becomes very conservative, where almost all the money's in the bond funds. And that change is called the glide path. Now, all the L funds except one have a year associated with their name. So there's like the 2030 fund, the 2035 fund, all the way up to the 2070. And at the end of this month, there's going to be the 2075 fund. And what that indicates, that's the year when that L fund is retired and all the money goes into what's called the L income fund, where the allocation is currently 24% stocks and 76% bonds. So it becomes very conservative. And supposedly this is a good idea because that very conservative portfolio, and actually the 76% bonds is almost all in the G fund, has very low volatility, and supposedly volatility is the biggest risk. Well, that's not true. Volatility is one investment risk. The biggest risk for long-term investors is taxes and inflation reducing the purchasing power of an investment. And the reason that stocks have historically been a good investment is because they had a high enough rate of return so that after taxes and inflation, they would still increase purchasing power. And the bond funds and bank accounts too, the rate of return is too low to do that, so that when the money comes out, the purchasing power is down. And of course, with FERS employees, their annuity loses purchasing power anytime inflation's more than 2%. So if their TSP funds losing purchasing power and their annuities losing purchasing power, that's a tough way to fund a retirement. So what I recommend is that don't treat the L funds as a set it and forget it type of investment. You need to pay attention, and when you're 10 to 15 years away from your L fund maturing, you need to take a look at that and maybe get out of the L funds and choose an allocation between the stock funds and the bond funds instead of letting the L fund do it for you.
So that's a lot of advice in one short statement, but I want to break it apart a little bit.
Okay.
And go back through the pieces of it. So if I'm a young federal employee now and I want to start investing in my TSP, I'm going to be auto-invested in an L fund, right, with one that's got a deadline of about when I might expect to retire? Is that how they set it up initially?
That's how they set it up initially, that if a new employee does not make a specific choice to invest in a specific fund, then they're automatically enrolled in the TSP with a 5% withdrawal from their paycheck to be invested. They get a 5% match on that, which is fabulous. All of a sudden, you've doubled your money. And they are invested in an L fund, which should be retired about the time that they would reach age 65. It's based on the age of the new employee.
So if I want to have a little more control over what my TSP investments might be, how do I then think about what my choices would be?
Okay, well, the choice is you can have any allocation you want among the 5 traditional funds and the 11 L funds. You just have to get on the TSP website and make what other allocations you choose. And, of course, the allocation of the money that you currently have in the TSP can be modified to whatever you want. And the allocation of the money that's being invested every 2 weeks when your paycheck comes out, that can have a different allocation than the money that's already in the fund. So some people, later in their life might want to have more money in the F&G funds because they're very close to taking the money out, but still want to be aggressive for the money, the much smaller amounts that are being invested every 2 weeks.
I'm speaking with certified financial planner Art Stein of Arthur Stein Financial. All right, so my money goes into the L fund. I can set it and forget it, except you're saying I shouldn't. I should be thinking about managing my balance between risk tolerance and return as I get older and as I might think about a more immediate need for those TSP funds.
Absolutely. And remember, inflation is kind of a silent killer. Your money might be increasing in value, but it doesn't mean that the purchasing power is going up, that you have more money to spend.
Just talk a little bit about purchasing power, Art, because it can be sort of a financial term of art, but it has real implications.
Yeah, one example I use is suppose you just look at first-class stamps. I mean, how many first-class stamps could you purchase with $1? Well, that's going down, year by year by year, right? First-class stamps used to be about 5 cents. Now I don't know what they are because I don't obviously mail very much, but I think they're closer to 60 cents. That's inflation. And so if your investment isn't going up fast enough to keep up with that, after taking into account the taxes you're going to pay when you withdraw the money from the TSP, then you're losing purchasing power.
So it's a balance between inflation and the rate of return on the underlying investment, what my taxes will be when I have to pay them on the withdrawal, and then the overall earnings.
Absolutely.
All of those things together. So it can get a little complicated. What should people be thinking about when they're considering all of those things together, the lifestyle they want this TSP to contribute to?
Well, they want a significant portion of their TSP investments to be in the stock funds, in the CS&I, and certainly in the beginning, for new employees and many years thereafter, if they're automatically enrolled in an L fund, that works for them because there's just a significant amount going into the stock funds. It's when they're getting ready for that L fund to be retired being the term that's used, that they need to think about, well, this fund has become very conservative, and if it's retired and I just let money automatically go into the L income fund, which is super conservative, then I'm going to be losing a lot of purchasing power, and I need to do something about that. Because, Terry, in today's world, people retire at 65, and they could easily be alive for 30 years. That's an incredibly long period of time to be managing your investments. And it's a very long period of time to be continually losing purchasing power every year.
So the longer your work horizon and the longer your investment time frame, the more heavily weighted your stock investment portfolio can be, which is what I hear you saying the L funds are at the beginning. And then as you get older, you want to shift to less volatile, more predictable, but sadly lower earning rate.
Yes, but not too much. It's just instead of 99% stocks and 0% bonds or 1% bonds, which is what you start with, and instead of the 36% stocks that you end up with the L fund, maybe something more like 50% stocks or 60% stocks, because it's those stock investments that you're keeping in your portfolio because you're going to need that money to spend in 10 or 15 or 20 or even 30 years.
It's a good reminder and takes us right back to where you started, that set it and forget it is not exactly where you want to be with your L fund.
Set it and forget it. Set it and pay attention.
It's a Good reminder. I've been speaking with Art Stein, Certified Financial Planner of Arthur Stein Financial. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Hear the Federal Drive on demand. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.